Hi, everybody. My name is Robin Walsh. I'm part of the Bart Ehrman team, and I'm a scholar of New Testament and early Christianity. And I think you could tell what I'm in front of right now. This was the Flavian Amphitheater in antiquity, but today we know it as the Colosseum. Obviously, this monument holds a lot of imagination for both ancient Rome and early Christianity. But was the Colosseum a site of Christian martyrdom? Okay, let's explore that question inside. Here's what the Flavian Amphitheater looks like today, and I want to break down what you're looking at here. But first, let's talk about what a day at the games looked like. Usually, you had about three phases, you might say, to a day in the amphitheater. In the very beginning of the day, you would have animal hunts, so exotic animals, also animal battles that would take place on the amphitheater floor. So you can see here, and I'll show you some other pictures, that there are actually sort of like caverns underneath the main floorboards of the amphitheater. And down there, you would have held animals as well as captives. So after you had the animal hunts in the morning, you would actually then proceed to public executions. So you would bring out prisoners who had been obviously sentenced to some kind of execution, and they would be executed damnatio ad bestias, is what we say, or bestius, I guess. But these are people who would then be essentially fed to these animals and executed for sport. This mosaic, by the way, is from Tunisia around the 3rd century CE. So it gives us an idea of what this may have looked like. And I'm sure that this is where we get the notion of Christians being fed to the lions, although I think we need to challenge this. So here's another look at the amphitheater floor and bringing you underneath to get a sense of how cavernous this really was. And you would have all of these sections again to contain the animals as well as the captives. This is actually a recreation of what one of the ancient elevators may have looked like to bring these individuals and animals up to the floor. And you can see how expansive this really is. By the way, you could also flood this area for mock naval battles because the Colosseum is built over what was called the Domus Aurea, or Nero's Golden House, where he had a man made lake. But back to the persecutions. A terrific source on this is Candida Moss's book, The Myth of Persecution. While Christians may have faced execution on the amphitheater floor, and I'll show you a picture in a moment of what it looks like from that vantage point, it was unlikely that it was explicitly because they were Christian or that they were sought out because they are Christian. It's more likely that they were participating in some other kind of explicitly illegal activity or something else that annoyed the powers that be. So, for example, not paying taxes might be something, or not participating in local cult. And I think a great source on this is actually the letters between the Emperor Trajan and the governor of Bithynia Pontus, Pliny, who says that he has discovered that there are so called Christians in his midst. He inquires as to their activities, asks them if they see the Roman emperor as an authority, and if they say no, he continues to question them. If they continue to say no, he is executing them, and he's checking with the emperor to make sure that this is okay, essentially legally. But it's not because they're Christian, it's because he finds them to be obstinate. And so I think this is an interesting counter to our traditional story that tends to put martyrdom and persecution of the Christians at center stage. I think we need to revise this perspective somewhat and understand that this was a narrative that helped create a sense of community for the early church, and also something that people could bound themselves together both with one another but also around. So it became a shared and common foundational myth for early Christianity. Again, no doubt some Christians did find their ends this way, but possibly not in this persecution context that we usually think of.
If you found this discussion interesting, please go to bartehrman.com/BSA learning. You can take a 14-day free trial of our content, which includes all kinds of courses, discussion boards, other experts talking about biblical studies. So that's bartehrman.com/BSA learning. Hope to see you there.